My name is Elson Sutanto. I am the moderator for this session. I am a principal analyst with Juniper Research. We conduct consultancy analysis into the IoT tech, digital telecom space. And I would like to introduce my panelists. If you'd like to introduce yourself briefly and what you do and who you work for.
Sure, thank you. I think that's applause is for us. Hi there, I'm Phillip Harrison. I run the consultancy department at Fifth Nine. Fifth Nine's a digital factory with two parts to it. The consultancy stream, where we help our clients understand the digital strategy, how they're going to implement it and their pain points, and the other half of the company is the development, how we develop the apps and solutions to fix those pain points for our clients. So we work very much in the telco IT space, been there for over 10 years.
Hello, I'm Wayne Lloyd. So I'm the CEO and founder of Smarter Contracts, which is a blockchain software and services company, predominantly working across sports and retail. I'm also a partner of EOS Nation as well, which is one of the top 21 block producers for the EOS platform. So essentially what we do is we just work with people who want to build on top of EOS and give them as much guidance and coaching as we can.
Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Genevieve. I just ran under all the wrong panel places.
Stay with me.
Because I was told I was inside. Anyway, I am the CEO of AgrilLedger, and what we're doing is using blockchain technology to revolutionize what I would say is the agricultural supply chain. So making use of, and I think in my point of view is the blockchain is more the enabler to allow us to be able to bring and to orchestrate all the different things such as IoT, finance, and all those things, and mobile.
Great stuff, great stuff. Thanks very much. Okay, so as you can see, we have had an email chain in the last week and a half about points to cover. There obviously is too much here, so we're going to cover on the core points, but I may have to wrap it up because we only have half an hour, but we'll try and do a few questions right at the end as well. So the very first point that we've been discussing about is what you guys consider to be the number one area or use case for the combination of IoT and blockchain, and why is this? If I can start with you, Philip, that would be great.
Yep. So I say right now the number one use case has to be supply chain. The IoT and blockchain combination has real power to revolutionize the provenance in supply chain. But that's right now. I think if you're going to ask me what's the future number one, I'm going to say smart cities. So IoT devices is going to increase or double by 2020 to a $600 billion market. And so smart cities is estimated to take about 23% share of that market. So smart cities and the IoT and blockchain capability of smart cities through smart contracts, trading of devices and data and the tokenization of that will absolutely massive.
Sure. Wayne, would you like to give your 2 pence to that?
Yeah, of course. For me, it's supply. Obviously, supply chain is the number one use case, and I think there's a number of studies that prove that. But I think for me, at the moment, there's a distrust between brands and their consumers, and I think that this is a real opportunity for brands to really create some transparency in the way that they do their business, and I think that has a knock-on effect to the digital experience that their customers are having and the way that they engage with them. So I think for me, that is
supply chain.
Yeah.
Right, sure.
I said medicine. So obviously, from my standpoint, it is the supply chain in agriculture and being able to trace. But I think also we're seeing a lot around the IoT and medicine, being able to really track what's going on with the patient and provide that in a trusted fashion. So using the power of the encrypted and also shared data between doctor and the individual. And finally, there is a great project going on in the US which is looking at that information being provided to insurance to reduce the cost of actually looking at those events. So if you go to the doctor and you're wearing that IoT device and you're doing the exercise that you say you're going to be, then it reduces your insurance. So there is opportunity there also.
Sure. So there's clear value in those use cases. But let's move on a bit more onto the kind of issues that are kind of holding back or potentially could hold back the combination of IoT and blockchain. I remember as part of our email trail that we were discussing, I think, about the level of implementation and the different stakeholders that would be involved. So someone, I think it might have been you, Philip, or Wayne, I'm not sure, but you were mentioning how it might be easier to implement blockchain from a top level perspective, but for the smaller guys at the bottom, it might be a bit more complicated, isn't it, really? Do you want to elaborate a bit more on that?
Cool. Look, end-to-end transformation is end-to-end, and in supply chain, it's not just you as the person at the top, but it's everybody else further down that supply chain. I think getting everybody to hook onto that supply chain in itself is a digital transformation project, even for the smaller guys. So that's relative to the money that they generate, and they're not as incentivized as the guys at the top. Talking about the broken brands and the disconnect between consumers and the brands. The guys at the bottom, they don't care as much as the guys at the top because they have a different value proposition. They just want to make it and send it. Of course, they want to make the guys at the top happy, but there's misaligned incentives for going onto these platforms. And for me, I think there's a lot of use cases out there where it's just a one up, one down, where you're just tracking it. Like M&S is a great example where you're tracking meat. It's just easy from one to them. It's just quite an easy thing to do. But when you're tracking the provenance of, let's say, a tiramisu or something like that, where there's 40,000 food miles, and you just want to track where everything's come in order to make that one particular product, that's very complex. It's not very easy to do. So I think that absolutely people are pushing on with working with blockchain, but it's not enterprise-wide because it's not as easy as people think to implement end-to-end.
Sure. Okay. Philip, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, so just to build on to that, that's absolutely right. It has to be end-to-end, and it's also a little bit of, if you get some rubbish information into your blockchain solution, then people start losing the trust in your capability. So you've got to have that full buy-in for the whole supply chain, literally end-to-end, from an IoT angle. So you've got to think about security. You're only as strong as your weakest element in any security solution, as I'm sure everyone's fully aware. So from that, you've got to look at your IT devices, the security on it. Most IT devices now have SRAM on it. Put a POF on it, so it's got a uniquely unchangeable feature on it, so it can't be changed, and that device is what it says it is. Register that on the blockchain, then it can always communicate, so device A is device A. Then you've got the transfer of data over to the communication network. Cryptography comes into there, hashing comes into there. Then the blockchain is the recipient of that. But that's got to be at every stage in your supply chain. If you have one weak IoT device, then you've got potentially corruption of that data and people lose faith in it. I think it was HP who said 70% of all IoT devices are not encrypted. I mean, that's crazy. You've got to design security at source to enable your lower supply chain who can't afford the high-end stuff to be secure.
So I'd like to actually throw something in, which is that the world that we know is changing, and it's been enabled by all the disruptive technology. So one of the things I like is called Post-Lean Institute, and it talks about how we're going to be working in the future. So I think that we need to start looking at where the individual becomes more powerful, and you basically are looking at spoken models. So because we're doing spoken model and there isn't that hierarchy, you then need to create trust across nodes. So we start working in a nodal fashion rather than a hierarchical fashion. So as a result, when we talk about the bottom person, that bottom person is actually shifting to where now they have more of the power and they're going to help dictate. I don't think that blockchain is the only answer, but it is part of the equation which will create that trust to allow all of us to be able to have conflicting outcomes, but be able to put enough data there to be able to work together. So zero knowledge is going to be part of it. So we need, I think that we are probably going to be the last generation which works in this way. The next generation are really going to be creating their own mechanism. They're not going to go into work, and they're probably going to work for themselves, for corporations. So that, taking that into effect, then we can start looking at having the tools. This is an IoT device. We don't actually think of it that way, but it is, all day long I've had this in my hand, and you can track me with that and say it's me. So I think that we're going to see a change, and the trust that the blockchain brings in is really going to be the change in there with other pieces in there.
Yeah, speaking on that note with trust, I mean, that was, I think, a couple of your points in an email across to me about one of the major setbacks that might stop it from gaining more traction than it currently can. And I think you were saying that some don't believe that current systems are broken. and that there is still some challenge in terms of educating the wider ecosystem, about this. It's quite hard for some people to get their head around this concept, right? Is there still some education, some push there to be?
If we were to walk around here and you go to some other places, even the data places, and you start saying to them blockchain, you'd see their eyes roll back. They might actually say, "Oh, Bitcoin," but they don't understand the technology. They do not, it's actually better in ways than digital identity was 25 years ago. People understood it but could never see a use for it, because I could see you. But now, in this world where we're sending things thousands of miles away and we're dealing with people thousands of miles away, there's a view for it. But if the technologists don't understand it, how do we expect the person walking the street to understand what this is all about?
No, I completely agree. I mean, I think there's a reason why we're in the trough of discontent, as Gartner said. So last year, there's a lot of companies talking about blockchain, pretending to solve the world, not talking about the real problems around it. And you hit the nail on the head. Blockchain is a technology, but you have to combine it with other technologies to have the real strength and power from it. But people pretending blockchain solve the world. So a lot of, I think, businesses have gone, blockchain's a fad. Put it in the bin, and now we're going through a real education cycle to show them of the proper use cases. So we were at Mobile World Congress last week, and the majority of people came there and said, I know what blockchain is, tell me about the use case. Here, you're right, it's what is blockchain. Completely different level of education between different leaderships of the businesses.
Wayne, do you have something to
I think,
too?
you talk about technologists rolling their eyes about. I don't think you can drive change through technology. Change comes from being customer-led, not technology-led. And I think fundamentally, if you don't understand what blockchain can do for your customers, you don't understand your customers. I think you're thinking about it in the wrong way. So I think, for me, when we talk to businesses about how blockchain can change their, the way that they work, it's always what can it do for your customers, and then that drives them on a path of thinking about the importance of the technology. And I think until people start thinking in that way, you're probably just going to have these problems.
I've worked in business, and I know what my technologists can do if they don't trust something and they don't believe in something. They can bury it so fast, and you're wasting 6 months. So you do need, I agree with you, the technologist is not going to drive, but if he understands the value, then from a business standpoint, you can help drive that. Obviously, this is not about solving technology, it's about solving business processes. But we need to make sure that the guy who's actually holding the key to the technology actually signs off. Because I've been in that place.
Yeah, no, exactly. So that's what I'm saying. So he has to understand the value that it will give to his business, but he has to understand that. And at the moment, people talk about it more as a tech. I'm not saying everybody, but a lot of people will talk about it as a technology rather than an enabler to change business processes. And I think that is something that needs to change.
So do you think, as part of change going forward, that the kind of lift-off or the traction will be brought about by those value points, starting from this is what it can do, this is how much it can save, this is the efficiency it can produce?
Well, I think people just have to look at the way that people perceive brands today. And if you think about, there's no loyalty in the world in the future. If you think that everything is going to be voice activated, you can't shove your brand in people's faces to make them want to buy it. They just want to buy what is the easiest and best thing for them. So, the idea that I've forgotten what I was going to say now. Getting well into it. What was the question again?
So I'm going to help you.
Well, what do you think is how should you approach? You're running a blockchain business. How do you approach a potential customer and say, take it, it's going to benefit you?
Okay. So for us, it's a process of education. So we're working on how we can do 2-day sprints to help people essentially workshop the benefits of blockchain. So day one, understand what blockchain actually is. Day two, we have a whiteboard session where we'll just ask them to think futuristic, using blockchain, what they've learned the day before, to try and help them come up with new ways of thinking. And if some of that sticks, then great. If not, just keep knocking on the door and making sure that they're onto it, basically. But it's just a process of education for us.
Right, I see. Sure.
I'd say for us it's business case driven. It has to be everything that we pull together for our client. The main driver is the business case. What are they going to save? What extra revenue are they going to get? The technology, we know we've succeeded when the technology becomes irrelevant. Whether it's on the blockchain or the cloud, it doesn't matter. We're helping a client have new revenue, reduce cost to serve, increase customer satisfaction. It's all about the business case. It's absolutely number one business case.
I think for me, what I'm doing a lot of my time is spending time with policymakers, sitting down with the OECD, sitting down with the people at ESA, the European Space Agency, to explain what the possibility and how you can use that data and how you can then start looking at changing policy. Because one of the things that we want to make happen very quickly is, as those brands are changing themselves and changing how they go about doing business, that the laws are not thinking that they're predatory and not changing fast enough. So if we don't make sure that government understands it also, then they're going to think that you're doing something bad to their organization, and how are you actually going to change? So for us, we're working with government, we're working with the World Bank, and we're really looking at that education at that level, so that the thought process is not just about how much money can you make with it, but how can you allow others to really partake in what we're calling the shared economy.
Sure. That was another point I wanted to bring up about regulation. So regulation, there's still some questions about areas in blockchain, how they can be regulated. Do you think this is a key area that has to be sorted out sooner than later, or the next 6 months to a year? What's your take on it, since you've been working with policymakers?
Yeah, so there are different parts of regulation. There's the financial regulation of how you're treating tokens and how you're doing securities, and really being able to protect people who are investing into the technology, which is very different than. I happen to live in Jersey, in the Channel Island. Actually, Uber is not there, but Airbnb is not legal, because you have to have a certain license to be living in a house on your own. So it's that shared economy is not allowed by law. So they are working on changing those things. But if you don't understand what the technology is going to be doing, so let's say smart contract. With smart contract, you're going to take an agreed paper, and now you're going to put it digitally, which means you're going to take action. There are opportunities also to be looking at arbitration, which are much less costly. So you need the legal system, the policymakers, to understand that, so that they then recognize the fact that that paper is now being acted by a smart contract. So those, and also if you have an IoT device, which is checking temperature and location, and it doesn't do what is expected, being able to do that penalty. So unless they agree to it, the person who you penalize could actually come in and say, by law, your computer cannot do that to me.
Right. Philip, do you have...
Yeah, the security and the regulation is an interesting one, because tokens, absolutely agree, we need clarity, and obviously later on this year we're going to get some direction, not decision, but direction on the whole utility security token thing, which I'll let you talk about more on. But there's also, everyone's fairly aware that smart contracts are not legally enforceable right now, they're just code. So there needs to be some direction and rules on that, and also if something goes wrong, whose fault is it? Now, to me, software, no matter if it's blockchain software or any software, if the fault is because your code is incorrect, it's got bugs and errors in it, then you're liable. If you're operating it and it's not the code's fault, then I think it's quite simple from that side. So I think we need to be careful. Regulations needed in specific things like tokenization and socialized security tokens, I get that. But when it comes to security, I think a lot of it, the rules are already out there, we just need to apply it.
But also with IoT devices, so I don't think there's any standardized way of making an IoT device, so it's a free-for-all at the moment. I think there's no, when they get the IoT devices, is there a standardized way of actually testing them and setting them up? It's just all, everybody's doing a different thing. So when you think about what we discussed, which was, and I'm sure we'll come on to it, which is the hard border in Ireland, then, there's regulation all the way through that process, hasn't even been given any thought yet. And it's like, it's going back to what I say, it's not just integrating technology, it's more what the end-to-end journey looks like for your customers end-to-end, but also for you as a business. And of course, regulation is needed because it gives you structure on how you do that end-to-end. So yeah, and it's just like everything else, you just need some rules to work alongside.
Sure, no worries. But I'm going to change it up a little bit and ask if there's any questions from the crowd for our panelists up here. Any particular topics? No? It is blockchain. All right, no worries.
Anything but what is blockchain?
What are your predictions, let's say, for the next 12 months within this space? Could be to do with industries, it could be particular regions that you might see lifting off. I'll start with you, if that's the right way.
I'm not going to be a futurist. I'm not, because it just sticks with you, right? So, but I just think
factors that are shaping.
No. I think it's just there'll be more maturity in the way that people approach the technology. You know, if we're focusing on the technology, not use cases like crypto and stuff like that. But for me, it's a process of regulation and education. That is the most important thing here, and I think it's making businesses understand that the technology is not something that you need to be scared of. When I go in and talk to businesses or CEOs or whatever, the first thing they're like, it's like this mystical thing that you feed at night and stuff. You just got to make them realise that it's something that can actually enhance the way that they do their business rather than something that threatens it. I think once you get them on a path where you start teaching them about the benefits, then people are a lot more, they'll look for easy use cases, like where can they reduce costs and losses in their business. And once you've got them on that road, then I think they become a bit more aggressive in what they want to solve, and it's probably what will happen.
Sure. We had another point about how it's not an overnight process to implement blockchain, and it can be done pretty realistically, I think, incrementally, right?
Yeah.
You were saying it's a gradual kind of implementation. I'm just thinking, like, do you ever have, for example, like that perceived risk from the industries, from clients? They understand the benefits, they understand where it's at, but they, for example, think, well, we have legacy systems, we have a lot of red tape, we understand it, it's just too difficult for us to get there. I mean, there are situations like that, I'm sure. Would you like to comment on that?
That is actually what's happening with the banks. They cannot risk ripping out their systems because that will destabilize them and it will put them in a topsy-turvy. So they have created an ability to take some of the processes, such as reconciliation, and use blockchain for that. I think that there is an opportunity as startups to be able to provide solutions to them to hook in, but eventually they will try and own it also, because those 50-year-old systems will die at some point. Right. My prediction is, we were talking IoT. I think that there needs, actually blockchain is easier for standardization than IoT is. There's so many pieces being created. I'm scared of the rage of the machine. Right. happening, because we don't know who's controlling them. How are we making sure that they are getting the updates that they need to have? And I think that there needs to be more conformity and governance in that space for us to then be able to use them effectively and to really benefit from them.
Yeah, sure, Philip.
Yeah, I think in the banking, you're absolutely right. You need to be working together, the startups, the ones who have the solutions, working with those who know their industry inside out to really work it together. I think someone asked me about, as we were talking about supply chain solution, and they were saying, well, do people need to rip up their system? I said, well, no, because the problem is a lot of people can't prove their supply chain at the moment. So the systems aren't there or they're not that brilliant. So they're willing to look at the IoT devices together with the blockchain capability to put in a new capability. Now, yes, does the data need to link in with their existing big data analytics? Of course it does, to be able to show that big, wider piece. But I don't think it's always a case of ripping something out to put something else in. Sometimes it's new deployment work in synergy with what's there already. I think that's where some of the quick wins and real power added value come from. Absolutely, especially in IoT, which is a new area, let's be honest. It hasn't hit full maturity yet.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of supply chain, it's sometimes really difficult to find the use case for supply chain, because you have to, give a return of investment. So it is, what are you looking for in the first instance? And for companies that are, driven by margin, and their margins are being slashed all the time, it's a lot harder to justify the expenditure of finding new ways of doing supply chain, because it's just seen as a cost until you get a return. But for other like luxury items, I can definitely see it. So when when you're selling sex in fabric or cars or something like that, it's a lot easier to justify why you're enhancing the supply chain, because it can give you data that allows you opportunities to sell on a different level once you get to that point, so you can understand it. But
I mean, just on that, I mean, everyone wants to now know fair trade. They want to know their items aren't coming from sweatshops. So that's not just a new value add, that's an expectation. And then you can really monetize that. We can prove that all our bananas are fair trade. That's
but
really
not
powerful.
only the fair trade, there is actually ability now to use that data. So we know that data is truth. We know what actually went to the bin and what actually made it. Then you can start looking at using already existing instrument to create liquidity into the supply chain. And by really looking at how can you basically have investment into the performance. That's something that's already being done. But how, sometimes they don't want to touch it because they don't understand the supply chain, what is the true value. So I think that there are opportunity for better instruments, and so I beg to differ also on to the mass number. If I want to provide to a farmer inputs, I'd like to know what's happening and being able to help him get to better yield. And if the yields are not getting there, being able to get the insurance and assuring that the cost is maintained. So there are a lot of opportunity by being able to create trust in data that we can explore.
Sure. That's a good point. I think one of the other key questions that we were touching on were IoT devices are out there today, so why do we need blockchain? I think one point we were saying is that there's trust in that information that's captured, really. Do you want to expand a bit on that, Philip?
Yeah, so at the moment the IoT devices are out there, so every telco's got their IoT devices, they go out and do a specific job. This world we're going to is interoperability. So you need to be able to have devices now talking to each other. Something happens, so let's say you've got a car going into a toll booth. The car's got a black box, knows it's going to a toll booth. The toll booth reads the registration number of the car and then it automatically charges the owner of that car to use the toll booth, such like. So that's IoT devices from different providers all interacting, and therefore you have there needs to be trust between untrusted parties, and that's the difference. So we're going to this world where there needs to be this interoperability in the smart city space, whereas before we haven't. As IoT device has done one thing, that's fine, it's trusted, it's one thing, but now they're all talking, and that's where blockchain really needed in this new world.
Sure. Do you have any thoughts yourself?
No, that was perfect.
I agree. No, it's just all about data integrity. That's the main thing, and that's the reason.
And that's what you can achieve, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any questions? I wanted to go to the crowd. Sure, okay.
So I'd like to ask if there is any live examples that you'd like to talk about of IoT and blockchain that you think are particularly well fitting, particularly well suited, and are hitting what the use case was for.
I can take one on that one. We are going to be, so in Haiti, we're going to be tracking, we're going to be tracking mangoes. And in the box, you will have an IoT device which is going to keep track of the temperature and also the location. And it's tied onto the QR code for that box. So you're measuring that the temperature is always kept to what it is. And that's something which is already there. But however, what will happen is that when the temperature hits above what it's supposed to be, so it's too hot, you are going to throw this or say it's no longer good enough. So therefore, at that point, you're also going to ding the person who's responsible for carrying and keeping the temperature. So this is where IoT is coming in and working with the blockchain to provide that trust into the data.
Do you guys have any other use cases?
Do you know, one of the downsides of being a supplier in the B2B space, having to white label everything, is that you're NDA to your eyeballs. So the answer is yes, but I can't talk about them.
Do you want me to give you an example of one, or one that I'm actually working on?
Go on.
No, I can't, because like you, I can't. I think the one for me, the one great example is turning a car into an IoT device. So you've seen Build Your Dreams with VeChain in terms of what they're doing. So essentially they track your car, the way that you drive your car, and then you get rewarded with credits at the end of your journeys. It's based on when you take your car for a service, how fast you drive your car, which suppliers you get your parts from, and the way that you run that car, you just get rewarded with credits, which scan a QR code on your mobile and you get to spend them. So that gives you an idea of how far this is probably going to go.
Great, thanks. I saw one more person had a
question? No?
All right, well, we'll have to conclude there. Thanks very much for attending. Can we just sum up with one key message, few key messages that you want to get across to the crowd? That's it, very short and brief, about blockchain and IoT. Anything you want, very quickly, because we're running out of time. Each of you.
The future is coming. I said the future is coming. We are going to have that moment of, what's that show? Shoot, I can't remember now. The future, it said we were going to have cell phone. Star Trek.
True.
For me, it's just, I mean, if you're a business, don't be scared of it. Just embrace it and just give it a go. That's really the message I'd like to get across.
Yep, and lastly, make it focused on your pain points, use case specific. There's a lot of waffle, a lot of nonsense out there. You can do a lot of good, but you need to focus on your pain points, real world use cases, and then it can have a really good impact on your business.
Fantastic. Can we have a round of applause for our panelists, please? Thank you.